Hello, folks. Welcome back to English 420 Comparative Literature. This will be our fourth and final video lecture on our last novel, the Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, and the 3 to 5 page double-spaced essay for that module 5 is due a week from today, November 14th. And as I've done in the past video lectures, I'll be referring to the module essay guide that contains on the first page the outline which you should be following. As it says, follow this outline. And then in the majority of the video lecture, I'll be addressing these 5 essay topics, and you choose one and write on that. So like the longer homegoing novel, what I've done is I've created or compiled a list of textual evidence for your potential essays. I'm not going to read through all of these because there are many of them. I'll just touch on some important and salient examples. So before I begin, as I want to do, I will contextualize this novel with and for you. So it's her sort of debut novel, if you will, and for it, as you can see here, it wins the National Book Award in the category of fiction, and that's a pretty big deal. It's not quite as prestigious as the Pulitzer Prize, but the Pulitzer is typically for more than a single work. It's for like a body of work. And here she is accepting the Jesmyn Ward accepting the National Book Award. And here she is sitting in front of her home or family home in Mississippi, where she was born and grew up. She's currently a professor of English at Tulane University, and many of you, or hopefully all of you, know that Tulane is, probably the most prestigious university in Louisiana. It's a private university in New Orleans. So she actually lives in this sort of rural area in Mississippi. In fact, I'll just bring it up here for you. It's called Del Isle. And so, not too far of a drive to New Orleans. So she does a commute. It's very near the coast, as you can see. So this Del Isle becomes the fictional Bois Sauvage. I know looks like it's spelled B-O-I-S as boys, but it's French, le français, as is, Baton Rouge and, right here, Lake Pontchartrain, which is just to the right here, Lake Pontchartrain. That's a French name. So as you can see, it's not too far. This is down here. If you can see, it's 5 miles. So she lives in this region here, which is technically Mississippi, because this is the border line here between Louisiana and Mississippi. She's got maybe a 20, 30-mile commute. So this is where the novel is set, right? Southern Mississippi, roughly speaking, what people in Louisiana call the Boot area, right? There you can see here This is the borderline between Louisiana and Mississippi. Anyhow, so here she is sitting in her family's home, which is uh, mentioned quite a bit in the novel. You can see here an old truck in the background, kind of give you a flavor of what is described in the novel. And in a text in 2017, it's actually a collection of essays called The Fire This Time, A New Generation Speaks About Race. She sort of describes her background, and I'm going to read a bit from it because it kind of contextualizes where she's from, her father, who, is this kind of figure for the daddy character, right? For the father character. Um, she says, when my father moved to Oakland, California, after Hurricane Camille wrecked the Mississippi Gulf Coast in 1969, by the way, that's alluded to in the novel, that the last big hurricane that hit, though she doesn't name it as Camille. Strangers he encountered from El Salvador and Mexico and Puerto Rico would spit rapid fire Spanish at him, expecting a reply in kind. Are you Samoan? A Samoan asked him once. But my father, with his black, silky hair that curled into Coke bottle waves at the ends, skin the color of milky tea, and cheekbones like dorsal fins breaking the water of his face, was none of these things. He attended an all-black high school in Oakland. In his class pictures, his is one of the few light faces. His hair is parted in the middle and falls away into blows into a in a blowsy afro, coarse into the right texture by multiple applications of relaxer. My father was born in 1956 in Pass Christian. Um, I'm going to pause there for a second because this is important to the novel. So here is Del Isle, right, where she grew up, and is the fictional setting of the novel, which she calls Bois Sauvage, or which translates to French as the wild wood or wild woods. But you'll see here running the coast is past Christian, right? So these are, real and not real places, fictional and actual places that are alluded to in the novel. So it becomes fairly autobiographical, as you, I hope, will see or have seen. My father was born in 1956 in Pass Christian, a small Mississippi town on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles from New Orleans. He grew up in a dilapidated single-story house. So think of the house that I just showed you. 4 rooms with a kitchen tacked onto the back. It was built along the railroad tracks and shook when the train sped by. The wood of the sloped floor rotted at the corners. The house was nothing like the great columned mansions strung along the man-made beach just half a mile or so down the road. Houses graced with front-facing balconies so that the wealthy white families who lived in them could gaze out at the flat pan of the water and the searing pale sand where mangrove trees had grown before they'd bulldozed the land. Put simply, my father grew up as a black boy in a black family in the Deep South, where being black in the 60s was complicated. The same was true in the 80s when I was growing up in Del Isle, a town a few miles north of Pass Christian. Once, when I was a teen, we stood together in a drugstore checkout line behind an older, blondish white woman. My father, an inveterate joker, kept shoving me between my shoulder blades, trying me to make me to stumble into her. Daddy, stop, I mouthed as I tried to avoid a collision. I was horrified. Daddy's going to make me knock this white woman over. Then she turned around and I realized that it was my grand aunt Eunice, my grandmother's sister, that she was blood. I thought you were white, I said, and she and my father laughed. Coastal Mississippi is a place where Eunice, a woman pale as milk, with blonde hair and African heritage is considered and considers herself Black. The one drop rule is real here. Eunice wasn't allowed on the beaches of the Gulf Coast or Lake Pontchartrain until the early 70s. The state so fiercely neglected her education that her grandfather established a community school for Black children. Once Eunice graduated after the 8th grade, her schooling was done. She worked in her father's fields and then as a cleaning woman for the white families in their mansions on the coast. On the local TV station, she watched commentators discuss what it meant to be a proper Creole. Women who were darker than her asserting that true Creoles have only Spanish and French ancestry. Theirs was part of an ongoing attempt to write anyone with African or Native American heritage out of the region's history, to erase us from the stories of the plantations, the swamps, the bayou, to deny the placage of those unofficial unions during the time of the anti-miscegenation laws between European men and women of African heritage had ever taken place. So in effect, what she's doing with her novel, or really novels, plural, all three that she's written so far, is, allowing her and her family's story and heritage not to be written out of history, right? She really makes this a kind of autobiographical story. And speaking of family and autobiography, this is the Baptiste family, as they are called in the novel. And it begins with characters who are no longer active in the novel, but are certainly referred to several times. Papa Joseph married Mother Elizabeth, and Mother Elizabeth is the house that at the very end of the novel they end up swimming to during the Katrina flood and save themselves. And it's therefore, by a kind of fictional inversion, it's the house that you saw her sitting in front of a moment ago. And Daddy, the character who is the actual father in the story, marries Mama, and their names respectively are Claude, Adam, Baptiste. Notice that there, as it shows up here, there is no P letter as in Paul or Papa. There's no P. It's not like John the Baptist, but they're similarly related surnames. Baptiste and Baptiste with the P and without the P are very common French surnames. Remember, the region was, at one time under the control of the French. Eventually, Napoleon sells the Louisiana Purchase to fund his Napoleonic Wars. Anyhow, so Claude Adam Baptiste marries Rose Temple as her maiden name, Baptiste. But unfortunately, she dies in childbirth, which we learn within the first few pages of the novel. And there is reference to, she, Esh, and that's her name here at the bottom, that Esh is one of 7 children, but we don't know 3 of the children. They're never named. Perhaps they died in miscarriage, right? Or maybe at some other point, but they're never actually mentioned. Now, Junior, of course, is, and he's Junior because, of course, you can see the name. He's named right after his father, right? Therefore, he's sort of like the second, but they call him Junior, and he's the youngest at 7. Randall is 10 years older at 17, and he's sort of the basketball star. until his brother Skeeta, whose real name is Jason Alden Batiste, a year younger, who, kind of ruins it for Randall by getting into a fight at the school when Randall is, trying out for auditioning for the band camp, the basketball camp. And then, of course, we have the protagonist of the story, Ash. She's the narrator, as well as, the kind of first person point of view in the novel. So that's the gist of the family. There are, of course, other characters like Manny, her love interest, and really the father of her child, though he denies it, and other characters, Big Henry, and so on. So if you all were born around the year 2000, you may have been, say, 4 or 5 when in 2005, August 2005, Katrina struck Louisiana and Mississippi there, Category 5 hurricane. And if you've ever been to New Orleans or you're from New Orleans, you may have seen this down in it's got a thing called the Warehouse District, down near the river, and what this is it's a memorial, but it's made out of, as you can see, scraps and pieces of metal that were put together in this house in a tree memorial that actually came from pieces of debris at or from the hurricane itself. There's a plaque that I can't get that to go away. There's a plaque that explains it, as I'll show in a second. So here's what it says: honoring the people and remembering the events that occurred on August 29, 2005. And here's the plaque. Like so many remnants of cultural debris left dangling from branches brought after Katrina, Scrap House, which is the title of the piece, is a monument to nature's unpredictable powers. Like all my work, this is the artist Sally Hiller, like all my work, the piece is made from common materials and recycled elements, including the bark of the tree, which was fabricated by Travis Lind out of recycled oil drums. So it's again, memorial to what happened. And in some ways, I show it because it's fitting, because at the end of the novel, and this shouldn't be such a spoiler, they have to, climb up into the attic and then cut their way out of the roof and then jump from that, drowning house to find refuge at another house, right? So in some ways, this house that's been tossed up and sort of apropos, as you can see here in this little park, after a rain, the water's coming down, that, this is the same sort of thing that in many ways occurs to not just their house in Delisle or in the novel of Bois Salvage, but many, many people's houses, unfortunately. And Katrina was such a costly hurricane, not only because, it was a Category 5, but because, we learned later that the man-made levees in the canal system around New Orleans had long been in disrepair and needed to be shored up and rebuilt and whatnot. But they broke, right, which caused huge amounts of flooding. And of course, a good portion of New Orleans is already underwater, or excuse me, under sea level. So this is an image of Medea here on the left and Jason. And I bring this up because it's pretty clear as you read throughout the novel that she is comparing herself, Ash is comparing herself to Medea, and therefore her love interest is compared to Jason. And it's because she's reading in high school at the time Edith Hamilton's mythology compilation. Uh, Medea, maybe some of you read uh, the actual play by Sophocles. She's a sorceress, right? And she's typically pictured with some kind of potion, magic elixir. And Jason, of course, is the famous, warrior who sets out to, reclaim or claim, not reclaim, to actually steal the what's called the golden fleece, or the fleece from a golden ram, or the skin from the ram that signified kingship and authority. And he does that with his fellow Argonauts. There she is again with some kind of potion or elixir. Um, so it's a fairly famous beginning in Homer, really, series of tales and stories about Jason. And here he is, a statue. You can see, right, the golden fleece that he has. He's protected and sort of guided by Athena. This is at the bottom here. This is Medea. Again, he's got the golden fleece. And he encounters on his travels, many of them, battles against the gods, the Titans, including Poseidon here. So he's a figure that appears in the novel, but also, it should be no surprise. I can go back here to the right here that Skeeta's actual first name is Jason. And so, spoiler alert, who saves Ash at the end of the novel? Her brother Skeeta, or Jason. Here's an actual vase from Greek antiquity showing Medea here. The story goes that Jason became engaged. So he was married to, maybe go back. He was married to Medea, but he is convinced to fall in love with and become betrothed to a princess. And this enrages Medea, and she ends up, as sort of punishment to Jason, who's over here, ends up killing their own two children. So you can see here the two dead bodies, and she, kind of rides out in a blaze of glory in a chariot driven by two dragons. And here she is with the knife, killing her own children. So this is a kind of sub-theme throughout the novel about the treachery of mothers. And I'm just going to jump to that text. So, excuse me. So the first, early on, allusion to this Medea Jason kind of analogy, which is Jason is to Manny as Medea is to Ash, right? On page 7 here, The chapter I finished reading day before yesterday is called Eight Brief Tales of Lovers, and it leads into the story of Jason and the Argonauts. I wonder if Medea felt this way before she walked out to meet Jason for the first time, like a hard wind come through her and set her to shaking. And she's about to go outside of the house and see Manny. We learned for like 5 months or so. And sorry. Then there's this on page 86, this allusion to the pelican. And it seems sort of just almost a throwaway, but it ties into this notion of the mother and blood and, doing or not doing stuff, actions for their offspring. So this is when she's referring to, when talking about her own mother and memory, because remember her mother has died early on in the novel. The last time Mama went with us to the bay, Daddy flipped his line backward and caught her palm with his hook. The barbed needle sank in deep. She pulled it out and rinsed it off in the water we were swimming in. I'd feel the scar and see those pelicans. Up close, their beaks were etched with dark like barnacles on a ship's hull, the same color as Mama's hand, and they were sharp as knives. And then I say here to compare, that is the scholarly abbreviation for confer or compare, the official seal of the state of Louisiana, and these allusions, if you want to go check them out, to several Shakespeare plays. I mention this because, well, the novelist brings it up. And let me just scroll through some images here. Or I can go backward. So there's the, official seal of the state of Louisiana. I don't know if you guys have looked closely. It is on some Grambling State University documents. It will probably appear on your, not probably, I'm certain that it will appear on your diploma, this image, because Grambling is a state university. So I'll give you some context for the iconography that will appear on your diploma. So here is a pelican, but notice there's some blood dripping down, right? And the blood is meant to feed or revive the offspring, the pelican's offspring. And so this is the flag, Louisiana flag. What they're referring to is this sort of age-old notion that a pelican will do that. A pelican mother will, if there's no food around, will injure itself in order for it to keep its chicks alive. This is a sort of stark contrast to, of course, what Medea has done, which is, kill her own children. In fact, it's the sort of obverse, kill her own children as a form of punishment to Jason. So here she is in another depiction with the dragon drawn chariot. I know they look like snakes, but they have wings. And she's killed her 2 children, right? But at the end of the novel, and this is under the category of number 5, about what sort of burdens does Ash carry, many of them, one of which is becoming a mother, right? And ironically, not having a mother to teach her how to be a mother, right? There's no role model. It's, as the end of the book tells us, it's pretty sparse on parenting in this novel. But the novelist, Jesmyn Ward, makes it very clear this kind of Medea, Esh, even Ward herself, Katrina connection, all of which are female characters, right? She, meaning the hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, left us to salvage. This part of the title of the novel, Salvage the Bones, right? Katrina is the mother we will remember until the next mother, which with large, merciless hands committed to blood comes. And again, Medea is the one who's merciless and kills her own kids. So she's kind of equating symbolically, right, the Katrina, because it's a female name. I guess it would have been hard to do if it was Ian, right, this past summer. But, it's equating Katrina to this, phenomenon, natural disaster relate that takes away life. And what we learn at the end of the novel is there's this uncertainty about whether China, the white pit bull owned by Skeeta, actually will return or, perhaps drowned. So again, offspring or, kind of precarious in this novel. So continuing with some of these images, there again is Medea. So I use this image because this is roughly the description of China, the white pit bull, becomes almost like a character in the novel, especially the way Skeeta has a relationship with her, if you will. So pit bulls, they're a kind of terrier. There are many species of terrier dogs, and they're bred for different purposes, but they can be bred and sometimes are bred for actual fighting. And here's an old image, probably from Britain, but it used to happen in Europe. It's even referred to as far back as Shakespeare's plays in the late 1500s, early 1600s, something called bear baiting. So here's a bear that they have chained up, and you can see they're allowing dogs to attack the bear. And what's happening in the background is they're betting on either which dog will survive or how long the dogs will survive or whether they'll kill the bear, right? So there's this sort of, gruesome kind of betting going on, and that actually occurs in the novel itself. It's a pretty, brutal, inhumane way to treat otherwise, pretty awesome animals, because it damages them. It creates, a kind of crisis if there are children around, because they can, they are animals, even though they can be tamed, they can be unpredictable. And you may remember, that it's pretty much outlawed, but Michael Vick, right, was accused, this is back in 2008, so a few years after Katrina in 2005, but he's found to have a dogfighting ring, kennel and whatnot. So that is referred to the dogfighting, and it's one of the questions actually. What is the importance of dogfighting in the novel, right? Because it is dangerous, right? In fact, there's a character who gets bitten, a human who's bitten by a dog in the novel. It's illegal, certainly, right? So it's all done underground, and it's certainly inhumane to the dogs. So one of the reasons that it's done, there are several reasons, but one of the main reasons that it's done, according to Skeeta, who owns the dog, right? He tells her, no, Ash, I'm saving them puppies. They're money. If my dogs live, I can make $800 off them. $800. Do you know what we can do with $800? So in some ways, it's a source of income, right? But in other ways, it's, as I point out here, it's a way for Skeeta and other typically male um, peers to earn some kind of respect and admiration from each other. The boys have been drawn by gossip of the fight between Kilo and Boss to the clearing like the Argonauts were to Jason. They will throw their dogs into the ring, their own dangerous Aegean Sea, to be able to say, my bitch did it, or my nigga got him, right? This is nothing but bragging rights. It's not, I mean, maybe they are betting on it, right? But it's a way to, like, have a drag race down the street and say, oh, I have the fastest car, um, and therefore that really makes it even more inhumane, when you think about the plight of the animal. So there's a strange relationship between Skeeta and China. Uh, you know, here, she narrates, Ash is narrating here. He is focused on China like a man focuses on a woman. Or down here, it's a little even more overt, right? China barks, nods, her front legs rest on his, meaning Skeeta's chest like a lover's. She flings her head back in submission, supplication. Good bitch, Skeeta says, always my bitch. So, for the novel, when I ask, what is the importance, right? It serves several functions, right? It's monetary, it's, a way for a young teenager to earn respect. But it's also a kind of replacement for love and affection he doesn't have, Skeeta. And remember, Mama has died. Their mother died having Junior, actually, 7 years prior. And there's never any real mention of Skeeta having a girlfriend, right? There's lots and lots of mention of Ash and her partners. Becomes a kind of sub theme in the novel. So let me go back to, well, not back to, but the first one I never really talked about, about how poverty does or doesn't reinforce and perpetuate injustice. And so you can think about this question in relation to something we call environmental injustice. So they're living in a rural town and they're not even within the town sort of city limits. They're, what people in Louisiana or down in the South would say they're country, right? They like live in the country and they're country folk. And there are environmental problems that kind of create and reinforce and reify the poverty of that rural community. So let me actually just jump to this answer that Ward gave in, there was a Paris Review interview in 2011, and they asked her, do you think of your writing as political? And she answers the question with a response from and about the novel Salvage the Bones. After I finished my first draft of Salvage the Bones, I felt that I wasn't political enough. I had to be more honest about the realities of the community I was writing about. After my brother died in the fall of 2000, 4 young Black men from my community died in the next 4 years from suicide, drug overdose, murder, and auto accidents. My family and I survived Hurricane Katrina in 2005. We left my grandmother's flooding house, were refugee sheltered by a white family, and took refuge in trucks in an open field during a Category 5 hurricane. I saw an entire town demolished, people fighting over water, breaking open caskets, searching for something that would help them survive. I realized that if I was going to assume the responsibility of writing about my home, I needed narrative ruthlessness. I couldn't dull the edges and fall in love with my characters and spare them. Life does not spare us. And so again, I ask, how does, in the novel, how does poverty reinforce or perpetuate injustice? She, recognizes, though she acknowledged she, wasn't political enough, she didn't lean, she thought hard enough on the poverty and racial injustice portion. What I try to do is point out a number of examples of where she does, and that does come through. And the first one, it occurs right on the first page. And it's a reference to the pit. Mama gave birth in the house she bore all of us in. Here in this gap in the woods, her father cleared and built on what we now call the pit. Well, it was a pit because, as you'll see on page 14, the origin of it, it was a basically giant dugout hole that, of course, gathered water. My mama's mother, Mother Elizabeth, and her daddy, Papa Joseph, originally owned all this land, around 15 acres in all, which is, pretty good chunk of land. Most regular residential houses are, an acre or less. It was Papa Joseph nicknamed it all the pit. Papa Joseph, who let the white men he worked with dig for clay that they used to lay the foundation for houses, making it into a pond. So, they have this land, but the literal land that they own, right, these acres, they're basically selling to, as income. Sort of like, in other words, they made their own property a quarry, and they weren't mining out diamonds and gold, right? But they were quarrying out the land itself, the clay. So here's another example of the poverty. The truck broke right after Mama died, and Daddy got disability checks from it since it was an accident. Up close, Daddy smells like vinegar, like salt. That is his fresh alcohol smell. So what we learn is that Daddy is getting disability checks because he has an accident and he ends up losing fingers on his hand, right? And he is kind of this down and out figure. He is a salvager, right? And that's part of the novel's title, right? Salvage what? Salvage the bones, right? But he is himself an actual salvager. He doesn't have an income per se, steady income. And then there's this really important, in terms of poverty, statement by Ash, the narrator. The girls say that if you're pregnant and you take a month's worth of birth control pills, it will make your period come on. Say that is what you want to do when you can't afford an abortion, when you can't have a baby, when nobody wants what is inside of you. I bring this up in the context, of course, of poverty because, she can't afford an abortion. And right now, Alabama has already done it, and Louisiana is considering it, and many states are considering it. Since the uh, case of Dobbs, the Supreme Court case, I think is it Dobbs versus Mississippi, since we're already set in Mississippi, right? Kind of weird that you know, the novelist is from Mississippi. She sets her novel in Mississippi, and the actual court case that is now has overturned Roe versus Wade is also from Mississippi, from this Jackson's Women's Health Organization. So that the state health officer, this guy who's basically in the pocket of conservatives, said, "Well, I'm going to sue Jackson, Mississippi, Jackson Women's Health Organization," and it was taken all the way to the Supreme Court, and what it ends up doing is giving back the authority to decide, is abortion legal or not legal, to the state. So from the Roe versus Wade since 1973 up till this past year, really, that abortion had been legal throughout all 50 states, and therefore is a federal law. But now, because the current Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade with this decision, it gives the states back their individual right to determine whether or not abortion should be legal within that state. And again, Alabama and Mississippi, and most what do you call it, countries in, it's not countries, but right here, right in the South, are banning abortion. So you can see here that in all of these Black states that are typically mostly in the South, it's now illegal to have an abortion. So it's sort of relevant, to put it in the context of poverty, because women are quite literally having to travel to another state to seek an abortion, or to smuggle in abortion pills, which is now illegal to do. Yeah, pretty crazy. And move on to question 2 about access to quality education. This isn't as prominent a theme in the novel, but it's certainly there. It's kind of imbricated or overlapped with poverty, as education often is. She tells us, Ash, early on, what she's reading, right? She's reading, or had already read, As I Like Dying by William Faulkner and Edith Hamilton's mythology. So a couple of things about this. On the one hand, the novelist doesn't say anything about that these are, pretty white bread, Caucasian, Western cultural text and novelist, right? William Faulkner, white guy, very prominent, famous Southern author, created this fictional Yaktapanafa County in Mississippi. And this novel, As I Like Dying, is set there. And the entire novel is a bit macabre. It's about the preparation for the funeral of the mother who has died. And so perhaps taking a page pun intended, not intended, from Faulkner. We learn early on at the beginning of this novel that Mama dies, and we don't hear anything about the funeral because it's happened 7 years earlier, but the sort of resonance of her absence, if you will, right? Her presence through absence is, pretty kind of replete, or just sort of a through line throughout the novel. So this question, if you've read As I Lay Dying, Bardem is his name, the youngest boy or child of the mother who has died. He sort of in like a Hamlet, recognizing the jester Yorick in the play Hamlet, um, realizes that the fish that they're catching, that once is just swimming in the water, then is going to be caught and cut up and cooked and eaten, that his mother is going to be that way too. Which is to say that there's this kind of transformative of mass and energy, right, as there is throughout the universe, though he doesn't think of it in those kind of theoretical ways. And of course, Edith Hamilton's mythology is where she is reading about Medea and Jason. But what's again absent here in this reading list, if you will, is any African American authors. So that kind of might remind you of Homegoing, our previous novel, in which Yaa Gyasi grows up in Alabama, right, and therefore is part of the novel is set in the South as well. On page 70, there she's describing the busing situation, because remember, after desegregation in the 60s, people started having to be bused across. I don't know, maybe you guys were bused across town and whatnot. For a year, we were very unlucky. And St. Catherine's schools, because that's where they went, their mother was Catholic, so they were raised Catholic. St. Catherine's schools changed our bus route so that we were picked up at 6:30 a.m., which means you had to get up at like at least 5 or 5:30 or something, to get ready for school. And for the next hour, we rode up and out of the black bois that we knew and into the white bois. It's not pronounced boys, it's bois, that we didn't, that spread out and up country past churches and one-room stores selling cigarettes and hot fries and chips and cold drinks and glass bottles and penny candy. And all the kids we picked up were white. So what what she's describing here is this sort of both class, but also racial segregation in terms of geography, right? Like this line right here. Yeah, I didn't highlight this one, but it really is incredibly annoying, frustrating, and unfortunate that Randall, who's not a perfect kid for sure, but he's obviously talented in basketball. He gets a raw deal here when his younger brother Skeeta starts a fight during this basketball camp tryout, and because of the fight going on, the coach kicks Randall out of the audition. Therefore, he can't be scouted out and even therefore try to get into college, right? And that's sort of brought home to light toward the end of the novel, when she, after the hurricane, she sort of looks on the scene and is just reminded of everything that sort of becomes central to a lot of her young life, right? because she's only 15, right? Um, that is to say, and this is pretty common for junior high and high school people, that the school itself becomes this sort of epicenter of memory and mental and physical formation. She says the high school had been flooded and the elementary school is smashed as flat as a pancake. And the semicolon here means that then you would go to the next page, in this case, 251. We passed what used to be the elementary school, the gym where Randall a few days ago played for and lost his chance at going to basketball camp and being recruited by a college scout for his talent, for being Randall, where Manny learned who I was and disowned me, that is, that she was pregnant, where Skeeta fought for me, and there is nothing but mangled wood and steel in a great pile. And suddenly there is a great split between now and then. And I wonder where the world, where that day has happened, has gone, because we are not in it. And yes, I checked this line several times, and that's exactly what is written there. So, yeah, so the school itself, right, becomes this kind of place of connection, but also disconnection by the end of the novel. I already sort of touched on dogfighting, so I'm not going to go over that too much. The next one is about the specter of slavery lurking throughout the novel. And it's not as overt as the dogfighting or the poverty, but it's there. You just have to tease it out. And one of the ways that she kind of uses, because we're in the Deep South, issues of slavery is this kind of black versus white symbolism. When so when I put something in square brackets, I'm changing the sentence, right, to contextualize who it is. When China was a big-headed pit bull puppy, she stole all the shoes in the house, all our black tennis shoes Mama bought because they hide dirt and hold up till they're beaten soft. This is the first of many black versus white uses of color symbolism throughout the novel, the most recurrent being a white pit bull, that is China, owned by a black boy, Skeeta. And this to clarify that, China is white as the sand that will become a pearl. Skeeta, black as an oyster, but they stand as one before those boys. So, not necessarily directly slavery related, but she's, clearly playing off of the black and white difference there. Now, this is a little murkier, but there's this line that's italicized on 56. It says, "What's done in the dark always comes to light." And obviously, the dark and white reference there too. But this refers to a lot of things. That is, the secrets the family holds, right? We don't learn much about Papa Joseph and Mother Elizabeth. And likewise, we don't learn much about Daddy and Mama, except through these sort of flashes of memory vignettes that you will have, like one here on 93. Mama dancing with another man. Mama had been on the dance floor. I'd never seen her dance before that, and I never would again. She was dancing with a man, not Daddy, while Daddy sat at the edge of the floor and watched. She had shook like china, threw her head back so water glistened down her throat, and her body ran in curves when normally she was all solid. She was beautiful. Now, I'm not saying that the man that she was dancing with became a lover with the mother, but if you read that passage, it's kind of steeped with some eroticism of her own mother. And so we don't know exactly what is, done in the dark, right? Again, we also don't know about the names or any information about the three other children who died or are not around. There's 7 children, but only 4 are actually named. And then there's this allusion to or reference to the Heart of Darkness, or at least I'm saying it is. It's this novel by Joseph Conrad. It's set mainly in the Congo. And the Congo is and was at that time this, let me see if there's the author, was this place that was a kind of tabula rasa, a blank slate, if you will, in Europeans' imagination. So, they were going to travel up the Congo River, which they did on a boat. Let's see. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on that. But, this Heart of Darkness, which refers to the heart of the Congo, which is set in Africa where people are dark, right? She says, we live in the black heart of the Bois Sauvage. And he, that is the farmer from whom Skeeta stole warming medicine for China, which he did. The farmer, lives out away in the pale arteries of the town, or the white sauvage. So it's this phrase of the black heart of Bois Sauvage, again, which translates to wild wood, wild woods. Wild forest maybe is a loose translation. But she doesn't say the heart of this, but the black heart of this, right? So she's deliberately kind of reminding us of another black heart, and I'm referring this to Heart of Darkness. I should point out, if you didn't already know, this is an incredibly well-read young woman. Well, she's maybe not so young now. She's now 45. But you can see where she started off at Stanford, right? Both bachelor's and master's of arts in English, right? BA in English in 99, and Master of Arts in Communications Studies. And then went on for an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts at Michigan. So, a very well-read, erudite person, and therefore certainly would know of, if not deliberately include this kind of reference to Conrad's novel, because it's a very famous novel. And if any of you have read Chinua Achebe, this novel called Things Fall Apart, by the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe, is a kind of direct response to Heart of Darkness. Anyhow, and then on page 204, Esh confronts Manny about the pregnancy. And what I'm saying here about this passage is that it's a place where we see a man uses a woman as a sexual object and then abandons both the woman and child, which is unfortunately part and parcel of what had happened during slavery, right? Of women, whether the field women or the house women, being impregnated by black men or white men or both, and not having a man around to help raise the children, right? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And this is what's kind of being replicated here in the novel. She says to Manny, I know it's yours. No, it ain't. I'm gonna tell Randall. You think they don't know you're a slut? And so he not only disavows his fatherhood, but he also degrades her at the same time, insinuating that, well, it could be anyone else's, right? Uh, Again, they're too poor to pay for a DNA test, a paternity test, but they should and could. And then the final question is so what sort of undue burdens does she face? And there are a number of them. And the first one she takes on herself, if you will, and that is a fairly disparaging view of her physicality and her worth. And therefore, we might say she has low self-esteem that, does not make her heart light. She says in various places here, page 723 and 123. So again, whenever you have a semicolon, right, I'll move from like one page to the next. Mama used to let me run around with my hair down, said it was some throwback trait. There's that allusion to, what we read earlier about the actual background of her father who had milky white skin and her aunt who she thought was white and almost bumped into, right? But I looked in the mirror and knew the rest of me wasn't so remarkable. Wide nose, dark skin, her mama's slim, short frame with all the curves folded in so that I looked like a square. There was nothing fine or curvy about me. I was still short and skinny, my hair big and curly and black, my lips thin. I want my hair out of my face. Mama was wrong. I have no glory. I have nothing. Pretty bleak self worth, right? But maybe I should go down to the bottom where she, uh, reminds us here on 159, there are 10 dogs here, around 15 boys, and I am the only girl, which is true. I mean, there is another young teenager mentioned when they go to the play basketball, but she's never really, an actual character in the novel. So Esh's life revolves around the dogs and the boys, or men, I should say, young men. Another one, that was the Medea Jason already. And by the way, the reason I use this as a burden, so to speak, is by viewing herself as this kind of, Manny and Esh are like Jason and Medea kind of analogy. She takes on this kind of romantic tragedy valence of the relationship, right? She's really, I guess, as I say here, first a crush on and then in love with Manny. She desperately needs to be seen and recognized by him, but of course he, excuse me, not only blows her off, but he disavows her and her child, which is really his. Yeah. Um, excuse me. Speaking of which, she learns she's pregnant. And of course, this is threaded in nicely at the beginning of the novel because China, another mother, the dog, is pregnant. The pregnancy test I ripped out of the box and tucked into the waistband of my shorts when I wandered away from Skeeta on the trip to the bathroom scratches my side. So this is where she's stealing a pregnancy test from the store. I know something's wrong. For weeks, I've been throwing up every other day, but the sickness and the vomiting make me think I should get a test. That and me being 2 months irregular. 2 lines means that you are pregnant. You are pregnant. I am pregnant. And so if that isn't a burden at the age of 15, I'm not sure what is, right? Um, so there are a lot of unfortunate burdens that she faces as, I guess you could at 15 still call her a child. She's an adolescent, able to get pregnant, but as we learned, she has little or no parenting. The father isn't much of a father. So that is a kind of summation of any one of these essay topics you could write on. And that is due this coming Monday, a week from today, Monday, November 14th. And that, as you can see, folks, is our last novel in the course. The only thing left after that is the exam, which, by the way, if you haven't already noticed, it's been open. That module, the exam module, has been open the entire semester. You could have taken it the first day of class, but that's it. Other than module 6. In other words, this is module 5. This video lecture 4, and then after that, that's the exam, which is all multiple. No, it's not all. Excuse me. It's it's sort of a hybrid between factual questions and quotations. Identify this quotation, this term, or whatever, and short answer and essay questions. So there you go. And I'm about to finish grading the essays on homegoing. So those will be in your Canvas soon. All right, folks, take care and be well.